AI is no longer the nice to have.
We're living in an exponential world.
That content creation is going to be IP protection.
I'm grateful.
This is the Pete Sacco Podcast, where technology meets consciousness. I'm Pete Sacco, entrepreneur, technologist, and modern-day mystic. Each week, we explore insights that expand our minds, challenge norms, and move us towards a more intelligent, intentional future. Each episode, we explore the edge of what's possible in business, in tech, and in human potential. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Thank you to the Pete Sacco Podcast. My guest today is Brett Munster, portfolio manager at Blockforce Capital. Brett, first of all, thanks for appearing on my show.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks. Over the years, in full disclosure for everybody out there in podcast land, Brett and I have known each other for a while. One of my first forays into venture capital was investing in the preamble to what became Blockforce Capital, a company called Reality Shares. It was actually the very first time I got to ring the bell. And I was out there for that. But Brett, why don't you give me a little bit of your history with the firm, what Blockforce Capital does, so that everybody is aware, and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, Blockforce Capital was started in March of 2019, is when we first officially launched the fund. But it dates back even further than that. Eric, our co-founder, had been working at a ETF business that you're aware of, and had been developing algorithmic trading strategies in kind of the ETF world, and noticed there was this crypto thing happening in 2014, 2015, and started applying some of those algorithmic trading strategies to cryptos just to test, see kind of what would happen. And lo and behold, not only did they work, but they worked far better than they did in the equity market. It's just a much more inefficient market. The crypto market is. It's much more fragmented, especially 7, 8, 9 years ago. And so ended up selling off the ETF business, going all into crypto, and that's when we officially launched Blockforce. So we've been running trading strategies for almost 9 years now. So we're one of the longest running crypto funds out there to date. And so, yeah, our view on the market is, look, we fundamentally believe that crypto, along with AI, are the two fundamental, infrastructure that's going to develop over the next decade to maybe 20 years. And we think that there's going to be just massive value appreciation in this market. Bitcoin's been the best performing asset, I think it's like 11 out of the last 15 years. And so we think that trend's going to continue. And so, but having been involved and having personally been invested in this asset class for over a decade now, we're acutely aware of the volatility, right? We're acutely aware of, I've lived through 3 big, 70, 80% drawdowns, and happy to talk about those times. But, every time the market bounces back. And so how do you develop a strategy that can take advantage of that long-term value appreciation that we believe is coming, but still weather those, volatility, just, day-to-day, month-to-month, as well as those big drawdowns periodically. And so we built a strategy that, we believe does that. Our goal is to capture, a majority of that upside, but then really minimize that downside volatility when it happens. And so, it's one of those kind of things where, if you're down, if the market's down 50%, you now need to double just to get back to even. But if you're only down 20%, it's a much easier, road to go back up. So that's what we try to accomplish, is we really try to minimize those downside volatility. So you can actually take this risk mitigated approach to a very volatile asset class, and you can outperform a passive buy and hold, strategy. Simply because you are minimizing, those big drawdowns. So you're always starting kind of in taking advantage of the bull market, even if you don't capture all of that bull market value appreciation. If you capture 80% of it, but you only have 40, 50% of the downside, well, you're going to outperform just the passive strategy. So that's what we've done. It's worked phenomenally well for the last, 7, 8 years. And that's what we continue to do.
Yeah, I'm a testament to it. I've been an investor in Bitcoin for as long as I've been a part of Blockforce Capital, maybe even longer. And you guys consistently outperform my own ability to trade, right? Because I kept a portion of it there because you think that, well, you guys, I remember that one of the tenets was, well, we think we'll capture 80% of the upside and minimize 40% of the downside. And I'm like, I think I could beat that, but I never do, right? Because you get caught up into this and to that, and you don't do it. And but I've continually funneled money into the fund as there, and it's continually performed well because of the strategy. And so I've come to enjoy it as an important part of my portfolio. A few years ago, I got the opportunity to meet Michael Saylor, and it was on the stage of the Abundance 360 with Peter Diamandis, and I enjoy saying that, yeah, I was investing in this long before you were even thinking it was a strategy, and so, but how has the adoption of a fund like this? Because look, it's been a tough road, probably tougher than people realize. Not the least of which was exchanges going out from under us. We had headwinds that were politically motivated as to is this as an asset that's going to be confiscated? How did you maintain clear head, through all of this and stay with the conviction of it when it was out of favor to where you are today? And what do the prospects look right now for bringing on even more investors to the fund? And you might want to give our listeners, how do they get in touch with you? What is the requirements to come into the fund if it's still open? I don't even know.
So it's an open-ended fund. We are taking investors, so feel free to contact me. Email is brett@blockforcecapitalmanagement.com. So blockforcecapital.com. And you can find us on our website, blockforcecapital.com.
Yep.
But yeah, the conviction comes from, having been, just the experience of seeing this for over a decade, right? And seeing similar patterns emerge. So I first started getting involved in the crypto industry back in 2013, and started learning, read the white paper, started learning about it. And back then there weren't podcasts, there weren't YouTube videos, there weren't newsletters. Right. Like you had to go on the Bitcoin talk forums. Yep. And you had to seek out, it was hard to do the research and really, understand.
Not like today,
was.
Right?
No, not like today. Not nearly as much information, as there was, back then. So, when I was studying, I was trying to learn, I was trying to understand what this was. Ironically, this was right when Bitcoin ran up to 1,000 back in 2013 and then crashed back down to 200. And, I'm sitting there and venture capital was kind of my background. I had worked at a VC fund for a number of years. So it's kind of my training. And so I look at like adoption metrics and usage metrics. And I'm sitting there in 2014 watching Bitcoin crash 80% from $1,000 down to 200. And yet all the usage and demand metrics are up and to the right. Yeah. And everyone's focusing on price, and I'm looking at adoption going, wallets are up, right? Transactions are up, volumes up, hash rate. So the security of the network's growing. Everything you would think about is up and to the right. So, the early, aha moment for us was, look, I don't know how to value this thing. And this is back in 2013, 2014. I didn't know how to value it then, but neither did the market, right? No one knew what this was. But I did know one thing. I knew Bitcoin had a fixed supply, right? 21 million fixed supply, set supply issuance schedule from here and forever. So there's perfect So supply is not a variable. Supply is known. It's fixed. The only variable is demand. And if demand is growing, demand is up and to the right, over time, price has to rise.
Yeah.
Does that mean price is going to go up tomorrow, next month? I have no clue. No, and we don't try to time the market as you can attest. I'm not smart enough to time the market. What we are saying though is if demand continues to grow and supply, that still to be fixed, price has to go up over the long term. And so that was the first aha moment. That's what led us to start investing back in 2014 originally. And then you see the cycle come up in 2017, we have the ICO craze and the markets go wild and Bitcoin runs up to 20,000 and then crashes back down to 3,000. And lo and behold, it's the same story plays out. I've done this with folks. I've taken charts of usage and adoption metrics without telling them the year and tell me what year you think this is. And they go, oh, this has to be the 17 big bull run or the 21. And I'm like, no, that was the year Bitcoin crashed 60, 70%. And so again, 2017 hits, we get that big run, 2018 market crashes, and the demand, but again, demand's growing. And
Yeah.
so that was the second aha moment. That is where we really built conviction, right? Is that 2018 was, I'd seen the story play out again. Demand was still growing. It was just, the market had gone down ahead of itself. It crashed back down. Again, people still didn't fully understand what Bitcoin and crypto really was back then. And so, you asked where the conviction comes from. I mean, that's where it was. It was really forged in 2018, having seen that story play out twice. So then you run up to, 2020, you get this huge run up, you get the FTX crash and everything crashes back down in 21.
Yep.
And it's the same story, Pete. Like, I can take you charts at usage, volume, transaction, wallets, just globally, right? And what you saw really in the difference in 2021 versus the other one was it was a much more global story. In 2021, usage and within the US kind of leveled off because everyone was scared about FTX. But globally, if you're in Lebanon or South America or the Middle East or Africa, like, you were just seeing growth explode even as
Right.
price was crashing down. And it was like, okay, well, the same story's playing out. Like, we know what's going to happen here. And it's just a matter of being able to weather those storms. So for us, it's always going back to those fundamentals. Is price, price gets the headline, price is, the flashy thing everyone wants to look at.
Yep.
But we really look at, what is the underlying growth fundamentals of Bitcoin and all these other crypto networks. And if demand's growing and Bitcoin's got a fixed supply, like, over time, the price has to go up.
Yeah.
And that's the long-term thesis. So then if that's the case and you're constantly watching demand grow, and we can talk about where all that demand's coming now and where we think it's coming in the next couple of years, how do you just weather that volatility? How do you weather those storms? How do you not take out a bunch of leverage and blow yourself up and not do something crazy or stupid? And that's the hardest part, right? Is staying disciplined, not getting out over your skis. And fortunately, with a decade of experience, that's really where the conviction comes and where we get a lot of that, discipline from. Is we've seen this story before. The data is there to see. It's the beauty of blockchain data. It's all there. You can see it real time, 24/7.
Right.
I've got much higher fidelity of data, much more data than, the equity markets where you get a report once a quarter.
Right.
And so I'm working in a market with better data, better volume growth, less competition. Like, I don't have to be that smart. Like, I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I'm smart, but I don't need to be. I can let's just follow the data, and just continue to as long as that thesis holds, right? Like, the conviction is there.
But, I think it goes beyond just the data, right? Knowing you, what our listeners probably don't know is that, you were a Division I baseball captain. And I think that takes a special thing, right? I'm a Yankee fan, right? So I'm still glowing over Cam Schlittler's unbelievable rookie game last night. I know you're a Dodger fan. And I know, you told me that you were at the game with your dad, the picture behind you. And it's a good chance that we'll be there again. But how do you think, being in Division I, right? Anybody who's ever been a Division I athlete, I played football, you played baseball, but when we signed our NCAA contract, you have more rights as a prisoner in this country than you do as an NCAA athlete. But how do you think that prepared you? I mean, I know that was got to be seminal to you. Then you went into the VC markets and this, but your ability to weather your storm and play out your convictions, the baseball had to help you with that.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, baseball is a game of failure, right? Like, you succeed 3 out of 10 times and you're in the Hall of Fame, right? And so, you fail a lot in baseball, right? You get out a lot and you've got to come back. And, it's kind of, that's kind of what led me to venture originally right out of college, and kind of why I was drawn to entrepreneurship and venture capital was, like, ventures, you don't need to be right very often. You just need to be right once or twice and really be right? It doesn't matter what any other investment you made. If you invested in Facebook or Uber or, one of those big companies, you only need to hit once. And so, like, that mentality kind of made sense to me is just an individual, just having played baseball. And then, it's just that resilience and kind of constant work ethic. Like, you just, baseball's a grind, right? Football's, you play one, it's a brutal sport, but you play one day a week and then you get the rest of the week to kind of, baseball's very different, right? Baseball's not physically demanding like that, but it's a grind, right?
It's a grind
every day. And it's just, you wake up and you're right back. And if you had a bad day, well, guess what? You wake up and you're right back at it tomorrow.
Right back out there.
That's kind of, what you take from it, and it's like, all right, well, crypto markets, oh yeah, beat me down today. All right, wake up and we're right back at it tomorrow. So
Yeah.
it really is a lot of that mentality is what I kind of took from playing baseball, and
It will test your resilience. There's no
yeah,
doubt. I mean, look, my background is in data center building, right? And so every few years I get that surge again of everybody wanted to go into crypto mining, right? And, like the Bitcoin market itself, which has never been flush full of institutional investors, right? It has been the avant-garde. Likewise, the Bitcoin mining industry was never dominated by big players. I mean, you have players like Riot Whinstone today that have a percentage of Bitcoin transaction processing, but I was inundated with guys that just, wanted to do it, on a shoestring,
yep,
right? So that kind of leads me to the next question, that what everybody wants to know. I mean, as a fund, a portfolio manager, nobody cares about how good you did before. They're going to want to know how it's going to produce over the next 3 to 5 years. And we're still pretty much in uncharted territory. Yes, the fundamentals look there. The demand is high. We've got a government that maybe has kind of declared it as an asset. And we've done a lot of things wrong in this country, but taking assets away from American citizenry is not one of them that's high on our list. But give me what you're thinking, the 3 to 5, not just Bitcoin, but what do you think about crypto in general and DeFi and other on-chain infrastructure, and just your sense of the market and where we're headed as a society that is now going to be led by AI, maybe the most influential technology that man has ever wrought? And what is that going to do? And what is the crypto market going to look like as a result of it?
yeah. So I mean, first you start with the regulatory environment, because for all of crypto's history, right? First 10 years in crypto's history, it was largely just ignored, right? There weren't laws for, or weren't really laws against. It just was kind of ignored and was allowed to kind of grow on its own. And in the last few years, you kind of had this regulatory onslaught between the SEC, the DOJ, the administration, everything kind of, that's a whole podcast in of
Yeah,
itself.
in itself, right? Yeah.
But it was, a real hostile environment for the last several years. So prior to this year, the crypto industry had never operated in an environment where the government was supportive, and yet grew to a $2 to $3 trillion asset class in under 15 years. So the fastest asset class to ever grow to that. I mean, faster than Apple,
Right.
faster than Facebook, faster than you name it. Bitcoin's gotten to that $2 trillion mark faster than any other asset in the world, plus another trillion in other crypto assets. So $3 trillion asset class, with the government either ignoring or largely even being hostile for the last couple of years.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you turn around and you've got an administration, and it's not just the administration, right? It's Congress. 60% of Congress is pro crypto. You've got new heads of the SEC and that are pro crypto, heads of the CFTC, like all throughout the entire government structure, not just the president, are all now not just, hey, we're neutral. No, I mean actively supportive of the crypto industry.
Yeah.
We've never operated in an environment like that before, which is incredibly bullish for us. Like, wow, like what could that unlock? So that's one big thing that we think over the next few years. And we think that's sustainable because, a lot of the stuff, especially we get into law, we have the Genius Act. It looks like we're likely going to have the Clarity Act. We may even have a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Act. It looks like we're going to have some tax bill.
Yep.
These become laws, which become very hard to undo by future
Right.
administrations. So I think this is lasting. I think this isn't just, the next 3.5 years. I think this is going to be an enduring thing, because it just doesn't politically make sense to be anti-crypto anymore. You don't gain anything by being anti-crypto, but you gain a lot by being pro-crypto. And that's what every politician has learned over the last couple of years. So I think this is a very enduring trend, is this pro-friendly crypto regulatory environment. You also, along with that is, for the last several years, it was a very bifurcated market, right? You had Bitcoin, which was the SEC had determined was a commodity and was,
Yep.
you could go there and institutions were allowed. And then you kind of had that meme coin craze, because what the meme coin said were, hey, we're not an investment. We're not trying to do anything. This is just a token. We're there's no business, there's nothing behind it. Like, we're being totally honest. And if you ask any lawyer, that doesn't fall under SEC purview. So what you had is this bifurcation where you had Bitcoin on one side, you had these meme coins on the other, and everything else in the middle was left like in this gray area for years. And so you had that really is why, the Bitcoin ETFs did so well and meme coins did so well, last year prior to the new administration, was everything else was a question mark. Well,
Yeah.
with new regulatory clarity coming in, that's no longer a question mark. So you have DeFi protocols that are doing hundreds of millions, if not a few of them are doing billions of dollars of annual revenue. These
Right.
are networks that are doing real transactional volume on par with, TradFi institutions, and real revenue, real fundamentals. That revenue, that value could never accrue to the token holders before, because if you did, the SEC was going to come after and sue you. So now all that value accrual is being unlocked. So we've been super bullish about, DeFi since the start of the year, in part because it's now being allowed to flourish. It's no longer in this messy gray zone middle area. It's actually being allowed to flourish, and there's real fundamentals, right? And we never got into the whole meme coin thing because, that's a whole different can of worms.
Oh, right.
But
In the altcoin world, right? To
Right.
me, it was really about the project that it was underlying, and there was no project there.
Totally.
Right.
Right. That was just pure speculation, pure gambling. But
Yeah.
in DeFi, there are a number of, networks with real transactional volume,
Yeah.
like Rival, TradFi, and like I said, doing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of annual revenue. So this is serious, right? There's real fundamentals to that. So we've been really bullish in that space, and you're seeing this convergence now, right? Where you've got Coinbase, right, who's now trying to add tokenized stocks, right? So that you got the centralized crypto player trying to add tokenized stocks. You have Robinhood, who has stocks, trying to add crypto and now tokenizing stocks and everything. You have NASDAQ partnering with Gemini trying to do the same thing. You've got decentralized exchanges such as Hyperliquid, Uniswap, and all these others who were trading crypto assets now trying to add tokenized stocks, like, so everyone's converging to the same spot. Like, it's going to happen. We are going to have tokenized, stock, you're going to be trading your Apple stock 24/7, 365, global access to anyone in the world with an internet connection. So you're not going to be limited by, do you have a bank account or how much money anyone's going to be able to trade this stuff. So the market size is just going to grow and expand. So these underlying networks, 90%, 99% of the assets that really matter aren't actually trading on these networks yet. That's what's so exciting. And they're coming, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the bullish case for the next 3 to 5 years is you're going to have tokenized stocks, your Apple stock, your Amazon, all that's going to be trading over blockchain rails. You're going to have real estate trading over blockchain rails.
I was just going to say you didn't even mention the real world asset of real estate trading, right?
Totally.
Absolutely.
And you're going to have fixed income and bonds all trading, like all this, and then you're going to get new markets, right? Like it's really hard. It's not really possible to, like, imagine doing fantasy football, right? You know, I have sports fans, but what if you're an athlete and you want to IPO yourself, and you could actually say, okay, I'm a rookie. I want to pull forward my future earnings today because I want to minimize career risk of getting injured or anything weird happening in my career. And I want to, almost take out an insurance policy. I want to pull forward those forward earnings. Well, let me IPO, 20% of my all future earnings and tokenize that and trade that on a market. And now everyone, now you could actually do, like, just like you would do analysis on Apple stock, you do that on sports players, or this just opens up so many.
I feel like you're baiting me because that few years ago, as I and I launched Hycon, right?
And I want to see this happen, right? Like, I can't wait for this, right? And so I just use that as an example, is that there's a ton of markets that don't even exist today that are going to exist, right? That we can't even fully fathom or appreciate or comprehend yet. And so all this is going to trade over blockchain rails. All of it's going to trade 24/7, 365, global access, right? And so that's where the world is headed, right? How long that takes, I don't know. Like, that's the question, right? Is that going to ultimately be Coinbase? Is it ultimately going to be Robinhood? Is it ultimately going to be BlackRock? I honestly don't know that. Like, how that ultimately plays out, I don't know. But the end state's so clear. Like, it's very clear where this is all headed. And everyone's moving in the same direction. they're just coming at it from different angles. So I mean, we're super bullish DeFi for those reasons, right? We're super bullish Bitcoin, which is something different, right? That's a currency, that's a
Yep.
much more debasement hedge, store of value thing, right? But yeah, there's just so
And you have
much.
a separate fund for the DeFi now? Because I know we had one at one time, right? But is it?
No, today we only have one fund, and but we have a basket of assets. So we have a, a a sector analysis. So there's a number of different subsectors of within crypto. There's DeFi, there's layer one technologies, there's Bitcoin, which is like kind of cryptocurrencies.
Yep.
And so we've got fundamental thesis driven analysis about each of those subcategories, and we track who are the winners. That's the beauty of blockchain. We can see that data and we can watch market adoption happening. And so we track the data of those, in each of those different categories. And it's our goal to pick, we want to ideally identify and pick the winners in each of those subcategories based on, data and market adoption and user.
Yeah. So, what do you think about, I've been tracking recently, in the data center, I'm pretty certain what we're going to see in the data center industry is, which first of all, the AI industry in general caught the data center industry napping, right? And so that's why we're having all of the power problems. And what I'm seeing in both the data center industry and the energy sector right now, and what I'm championing is decentralization, right? I think that we had the mainframe, and the mainframe was highly centralized, and then it went, decentralized to a software-based, Microsoft-dominated, right? And then we gave way to the cloud, and the cloud is highly centralized, right? And we've got the three major cloud players out there. I believe that's going to give way eventually to a decentralized cloud platform. And I'm already seeing it. It's funny. I'm appearing on Energy Central, which is like a podcast for the electric utility guys. And they're having me on as the data center expert. And I'm about to scare the crap out of them because I'm going to be the guy saying, look, the AI industry isn't going to wait for you to build more electric utility power and distribute it. They're going to do whatever it's going to take to further AI throughout this world. And it is my position that once the large language models will continue their proliferation, but that is going to distribute down to the edge because the world is going to be awash with inferencing, no longer just training. And that inferencing is going to require that we have an edge dominated data center. And I believe that's going to look like a DAO, just like a kind of a Bitcoin. I think it's going to be a DAO of independent operators that basically bring their data centers online, and they get, some smart contract based, probably also mimicking it with a real world asset tokenization play to help fund your data center and build your data center. But everybody will be rewarded in the form of a DAO by what level of compute storage and network that you provide. And there's already a lot in the market that are kind of playing that. I mean, you have, the one that's coming to mind, and I think that most closely represents what I'm talking to, is somebody like BitTensor, right? That is very decentralized in its thing. Do you have any opinion or experience with what they're doing? And what do you think about a project like that? Or what do you think about just in general of the whole decentralization of the world?
Yeah, no. So we've got a whole written report on BitTensor and done a deep dive into them, and it's super interesting because, I mean, look, when you think about centralization of training and building these AI models and data, right? Like that's concentrated into a couple key players today, right? A handful
Yes.
of key players, and I'll use the analogy of like kind of the media back in the day, right? When you had Hollywood, and you had, 3 or 4 studios, and they were basically the gatekeepers, and all the content TV shows and movies you'd see would basically gatekeep by a couple of, well, all of a sudden you get the internet come out, and you've got YouTube, and you've got all these, the ability for anyone to create content, right? And now you've got all these influencers, you've got Mr. Beast, and you've got all these,
Yep.
influencers and stuff that are creating content that never would have been allowed to exist through those gatekeepers in the past. And so what you get is there a lot of bad content out there, yeah,
Yeah.
but you create so much more content that there's some really good stuff that just comes through and shines, and it's better than maybe you would have ever gotten if it had to go through those gatekeepers of the past. I think you're going to see the same phenomenon in AI, right? Is there's going to be these big centralized gatekeeping ones, and then what you get with something like BitTensor and some of these decentralized AI plays is you get the wisdom of the crowd, right? And you
Right.
get a bunch of people piling in on their own, models and language learning models and all this stuff. And is a lot of it going to be crap? Yeah, probably. But eventually some of it's going to really be good, right?
That's
Just
exactly.
because of the pure sheer number and size and all that. And that's actually going to outcompete I think a lot of the, these centralized big players. And so it's for us, like that crowdsourced model is super interesting.
Yeah.
Because we've seen that play out before time and again in technology. Why wouldn't we just think it's going to be the same thing here? And so yeah, a project like BitTensor is very much trying to provide similar along that path.
Yeah.
And you just the research and development that can happen and iteration that can happen in that open environment is just so much more, so much faster. And you're actually seeing that starting to compete and outperform that open source model starting to outperform some of the closed source models of
Agreed.
the open AIs and those few players of the world. We think that's just going to continue. Is it messier? Is it a little bit more chaotic? Of course it is.
Without a doubt.
But ultimately, what gets produced in the long run is better. And
Yeah.
so I fundamentally totally agree with you. And I think that's that also limits bias. That limits a lot of
Yep.
the problems with having only a couple of these mega corporations that control all of AI.
Yeah, and even if there is three of them, it's not enough data sovereignty that, all things being equal. I remind people all the time when they say, well, there's no precedent for it. Well, there absolutely is a precedent for it. I point to even SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, right? Back in the day when they had to do radio telescopes at the sky, they realized that we can't possibly have enough compute to be able to do this. So they opened it up to everybody. And when they decentralized that turned out to be the largest array. I think the numbers are ridiculous. It was like 50 times the amount of capacity was searched. I mean, granted, they didn't find anything, but that's separate to the point. The point of that the decentralizing of technology is what enhanced the capability.
The robustness, the
Yes, the robustness of it
exactly,
was
yeah, and
exactly.
I think the same will play out in AI. I totally agree.
Yeah, and so I think it's inevitable. What's the future for Blockforce Capital? Where are you just going to continue down the path, and then what's it look like for the future for you?
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, right? It's doing the same thing we've done for the last 8 years, right? We have a North Star guiding line on how we want to approach the market. That being said, this is the crypto market and it changes, right? So, the ways we go about doing that are constantly evolving, right? We're constantly having to do, more research into new tokens that are being launched. We're constantly doing research into new algorithms and new, market dynamics. Over the last 18 months, the market structure of the crypto market has noticeably changed since we got the ETFs launched.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got to adjust to that, right? Now, at
Yep.
a high level, our approach doesn't change, but those, how we go about executing does, and it's evolved since we, launched, 6-8 years ago, and it'll continue to evolve and launch as the crypto industry evolves. And this is an industry that moves at a breakneck, pace, and there's always something new going on and having to understand, and so it keeps us on our toes, and you've got that guiding light, that North Star, which you're always kind of pointing towards, and
Right.
keeps you disciplined and centered. But you got to be able to evolve too, and you've got to be able to be flexible enough to how you get to that North Star, changes over time.
Yeah, this is an interesting time in the market, right? I mean, the market is at a really peaked high right now. I mean, even the guys who are bullish are wondering right now, how long can it persist here in the equity markets? I'm talking about it, right? And then in the beginning, we used to look at Bitcoin, at least I did anyway, as analogous to gold, not just in how it was it's a limited source and its time structure to be able to have your halving and or harvest gold out of the earth. But what where I was going with that is today, I always thought it was a hedge against what the market was. But what we saw was that it really kind of tracked like tech stocks, not really as a hedge to the market, but it actually trades as a tech stock. Do you see that Bitcoin is going to continue to track a segment of the equity markets, or do you think that it will serve as a hedge to the markets as we move forward? Do you think its role will change as it gets viewed differently by institutional ownership, which is, I agree with you, clearly on its way?
Yeah. So I would challenge the notion that it's a hedge to the markets. I think it's a hedge to global fiat debasement, of monetary growth, right? And there
Monetary.
is a clear correlation. Bitcoin has, the strongest correlation to M2 to global liquidity growth than any other asset, right? And it's the most pure hedge against that, right? Whereas, stocks, go up as liquidity goes up, but there's also dividends and earnings and other things that, gold has some risk off characteristics. So it's not a perfect correlation. You can just run the data yourself. You can, there's we posted a report on this. A few other people have done some great research on this. But it really tracks kind of this global liquidity and makes sense because Bitcoin has the exact opposite monetary policy as fiat currency, right? Fiat currency is theoretically unlimited. There's a limited amount of supply. We don't know when and if, how much dollars are going to be printed this year or how much. But
Right.
Bitcoin, we know exactly when. So it's this exact polar opposite of. So it makes sense that it's this, almost near perfect hedge against global monetary debasement. And so we think that is the story. Now, over the last couple years, you kind of get into this, Raoul Paul calls it the everything trade, right? That everything's kind of been going off this global liquidity where stocks have started to trend towards global liquidity. And so I don't think it's so much that Bitcoin and stocks have become correlated. I think it's that everything's being correlated to global liquidity.
To
And
global
Bitcoin was
liquidity.
just that, what it was. It's been like that since the beginning. I think stocks have now become more correlated to global liquidity. Hence those two, Bitcoin and stocks have become more. I think it's that. I think people are realizing, there is, we are structurally guaranteed to, run deficits and have to print more money because no one, there's no structural reform to entitlement spending, right? And that's really, until you get interest and entitlement spending under control, there's, you're structurally guaranteed to operate at a deficit, and which means your only, viable answer really is to print more money,
Right.
and debase the currency. And so everyone's kind of figured that trade out. And so everyone's piling into stocks, everyone's piling into, crypto. Crypto was just there first.
Yeah.
And so it as long as that continues, like we think that, that's going to be continued tailwind for both stocks and but crypto. And we just think crypto is going to be the fastest horse. And that's like, in that race is it's the most pure expression of that trade. And for that reason, we think it'll be, the best performing over the, the next decade plus.
As governments start to struggle with controlling of currencies and manipulating their currencies, then you have Ray Dalio out there, or the Ray Dalio subscribers out there to talking about the world strife and the world changing world orders
The
because
fourth turning. Yeah.
exactly, with the change of everything, and I guess one that is in the human vernacular all of a sudden is the idea of what could potentially be the reserve currency of the world. And I personally find it hard to believe that anything except for the U.S. currencies size, its size and breadth of market, there's no other currency in the world that I think could actually carry that workload. However, it is highly manipulated. What's your opinion on, the potential for something like Bitcoin to take over, since it's a far less manipulatable currency, to actually become the reserve currency for, the world?
Yeah, that's the $100 trillion question, right? And
Indeed.
so look, today Bitcoin's too small, right? The market
Yeah.
cap's too small to be the world reserve currency. It's a $2 trillion asset, and you're talking about $100 trillion market, right? There's,
Right.
If Apple came in, it would move the market considerably, let alone, big, nation states and everything. So
Yeah.
today, do I think it can't, right? But it's generating towards that path, right? And that's what's interesting. So I think it's a question of time, right? Over what
Yes.
time frame are you talking, right? In the next 3-5 years, is Bitcoin going to be the global reserve? Unlikely. I don't,
Unlikely. Right.
unlikely. Highly, I'll even say highly unlikely.
Right.
At the same time, I don't see anything else really displacing the dollar either. I mean, there's been talks of, today, U.S. is still the largest currency, or the largest economy. It is still the most liquid currency. There
Yep.
is no other currency or economy that could support being the global reserve asset on its own. The only
Yep.
other option would be is if you get a basket of currencies, other nations bound together and create and this is what the BRICS have, been
Yep.
speculation about
Tried
the
to
BRICS.
do. Yep.
And that's just a coordination problem, man. And
No.
that's a
Right.
trust problem between them all. And you've got
Yeah.
China not even showing up to the meetings for them. And like, good luck trying to coordinate and get that to really happen. I think there's too much of a coordination challenge and trust issue there. So I think for the foreseeable future, you're going to still see dollar being the global reserve currency, and dollar hegemony is going to continue, right? I don't see any way that changes for the short term, which means you're likely going to be living in a world where the dollar continues to proliferate, especially as you have stable coins, right? And now stable coins
Yep.
are essentially dollars on blockchain rails,
On
but
blockchain
now
rail.
you've got global access. You don't need a bank account to access dollars, right? You can bypass government central capital controls, and you can still get access to dollars. This opens up dollars. Stable coins opens up dollar access to a large portion of the world that currently didn't even have access to dollars. So I think
Right.
the demand for dollars is only going to grow
Yeah.
in over the next couple of years. Whereas relative to other currencies, right, relative to the euro, all these other currencies, I think the dollar is going to continue to, just continue its dollar hegemony, as we're going to see other currencies fail over time. In that environment, though, I think Bitcoin continues to rise, and I think you're going to end up, over a long enough time horizon, you're going to end up with these two, and the more the dollar, entrenches itself, the more the rest of the world's going to look for other options, right?
Yeah.
We've already seen this, when they, confiscated and froze, all those Russian. Not saying it was right or wrong, not having an opinion, just saying that was a wake up call to the rest of the world, saying,
That's right.
oh crap, if we hold dollar denominated assets and we wake up tomorrow on the wrong, the president of the United States wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, or we, have something, like, we could have all of our assets frozen. That's too big of a risk. We have to,
Yep.
right? And that's part of what you're seeing gold today. I think everyone's
Yeah.
going to gold today in part. Well, guess what? Bitcoin's gold, but better. And they
But
just
better.
haven't quite
Yeah.
realized that yet, right? So, you're not going to get into another currency where, everyone has to trust the US and everyone has to trust China, or what, like, in a world where, you can't control the currency, the world reserve currency. Well, maybe I can't control it, but I'd rather nobody control it. And that's exactly what Bitcoin is, right? No one can control it. So when you game theorize this out, it all roads lead back to Bitcoin, right? Whether it's the
Agreed.
monetary policy, whether it's the incentives, whether it's like, it all leads to Bitcoin. To me, it's a question of over what period of time. This doesn't happen, over a year or two. This happens over decades. So, in 10, 20, 30 years, I don't know, 40, 50 years, I don't know what time, but over some period of time, I do believe Bitcoin will ultimately become the global reserve currency of the world.
Yeah.
How we get there is going to be interesting, like I said, but I don't think that means the dollar is going away anytime soon.
No. Not by any stretch. Yeah. I think that the time frame is all that's really left to argue about. And I think the one thing we could probably agree on from time scale is it will happen faster than it's ever happened in the past.
Right.
Right. We're on an exponential curve, which is making all technology adoptions and all changes that we're moving towards happen at a faster pace than they've ever happened before.
The flip side of that is you don't want it to happen too fast, right? Because then
No.
you get like total societal upheaval, and
Yeah.
you don't Bitcoin. You almost don't want it to grow that quickly, right? You almost want this to be a gradual transition over time.
Well, you
And
couldn't
so,
have it any other way. The banking industry couldn't handle the transition, and look, AI alone is going to push humanity to the edge, right? I mean, look, I don't want to get too deeply spiritual on this side, but like the truth of the matter is, mankind has identified his intellect and his how much he sells his skills for on the labor market. He's spent an entire lifetime identifying his personal worth by those two things of intellect and skills. We're about to be replaced by agentic AI and robotics to some fair degree in the coming decade or two. I mean, heck, I met Brett Adcock, Figure AI, and I was looking at his pitch deck. I mean, he raised something like $1.8 billion against the $38 billion valuation, right? For a company that has no prospects to make any money by 2030, but pitch deck 101, right? Problem statement. I loved his problem statement. 59% of all human GDP is tied to human labor. That's $42 trillion a year. And there's 3.3 billion households in the world, and there's 400 million people next year that need healthcare or assisted healthcare or nursing assistance, and there are not enough nurses on the planet. So then his answer to it, he'll have 1 million humanoid, bipedal, autonomous robots by 2026. And that sounds big. But then he says, well, okay, we'll have 1 billion by 2030 with a B. And by 2035, 1 billion becomes 10 billion. That's more than people on the planet.
Yeah.
So we are undoubtedly faced with what's going to be the most dystopic time in human history. But to your point, given enough time to figure it out, I think that when we come out of this, we actually land on maybe the first post-scarcity part of the world. And I really want to be captain positive to this, right? Because I'm tired of the AI Terminator vernacular. I'm tired of hearing that Bitcoin is going to be the ruination of the world. I actually think we're on the right path.
Yeah,
And
there's historical precedent for this, right? At one point, the U.S. economy was 90+% agricultural, right? Everyone worked on farms, and then you had the Industrial Revolution, and now less than 5% people work on farms, but you have a lot more people and a lot more like jobs. Like that transition's messy. Don't get me wrong. That transition's difficult. It is messy. Yeah. It is going to be painful, right, for a large number of people. I agree. The light at the end of the tunnel is every time we've ever gone through these sort of big transitions, whether it was from agrarian to the industrial age to digital age, new things emerge that you couldn't. It's really easy to sit here and think of all the jobs that are going to get lost, right?
Yeah.
It was really easy. I don't know if you know this, but like when the car came out, everyone was like, oh, well, the horse is going to, anyone that, that takes care of horses and stables is going to be out of business. And, the shoesmith's going to be out of business, and that's really bad. But what you couldn't envision was, oh, there's going to be roads, and there's going to be, now there's going to be highways, and there's going to be infrastructure. Now there's going to be, with the second and third order knockoff effects. Not only do you have, to help build and repair cars, but now you've got, fast food restaurants and all that, and that becomes much more travel and hotels and all this stuff like is a second order knockoff effect. But when the car was originally built, there was literally laws passed that said if a car comes up near the horse, the car has to stop, not only turn off the engine, but I think had to like take out the steering wheel, take out part, and that was a law, right?
Yeah.
To protect horses, right? And because everyone was so scared, and we look back in today, and that's like, oh, how silly is that? But same thing happened in industrial revolution when we moved to the internet world. Like social media influencer could never have been thought of 30 years ago, right? Like that was
Yeah.
not something you could envision or
Not
imagine.
even in the vernacular.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. And you know, social media marketing and all this stuff that has come up around the internet now, you know, AdWord search and all this stuff, like none of that could have even been fathomed, but it was really easy to see all the jobs that the internet was going to displace and whatnot, right? So
Yeah.
every time we go through these major transitions, it's really easy to see what's going to be displaced, but it's really hard to see what new things are going to be created.
Yeah.
And I don't know what those new things are, but I do have this belief in humanity, this optimism. Maybe it's naive optimism, but it is optimism that I think we figure it out now, and we end up in a better place at the end. But again, I do agree that, you know, that transition's messy, right? If you've got a job that gets displaced by AI or whatever, like it's hard to relearn and retrain, and that is messy, that is difficult, that is painful. I do believe there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't think AI is this doom and gloom story. Yeah.
I think that's a perfect place to end, right? I've been appreciative of it, but yeah, because I love the positive nature of that. I am the optimist guy, right? No technology has ever destroyed mankind. I'm about to give a TEDx talk, and in fact, the title of it is "The World as We Know It Is About to End, and Here's Why That's a Great Thing." And my premise is we need to stop looking at AI as a rival and recognize it as a mirror that's going to allow us to become more humane.
Yep.
More human, excuse me. It's going to allow us to do what always we were meant to do: love and support one another, and be selfless and altruistic. The technology, let the technology do the mechanical.
Yeah.
Let it build the wealth, and let humans be humans. But it's going to be a long ride to get there. But I'm with you. I think it's positive. It hasn't destroyed us yet. Well, we drive ourselves to the brink sometimes, but we figure out how to get it done as humans. I think that's, Brett, over the years that we've known each other, I think that's why we connect, because we fundamentally are optimists, not pessimists. And I want to applaud you on all the hard work that you've done. Again, I think you could. What is your email address again? If people are interested in trading on the fund,
yeah, you can find us on our website at blockforcecapital.com, and then it's Brett, BRETT, at blockforcecapital.com.
That's perfect, Brett. Thanks again. It's always people should go find your newsletter. I rely on getting to read it. When you put it out once a month, it's full of tremendous insights into the industry. And so I really appreciate your spending the time with me today. And I loved our conversation.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining me on the Pete Sacco Podcast. If today's conversation sparked insight or inspiration, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. You can find more on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and LinkedIn. Until next time, keep evolving, keep leading, and find your bliss.